Hello again, friends. I'm glad that you are with me again today to share another story from The Tales of the Kingdom by David and Karen Maines. I'm very excited about our story today because it reminds us about who we are and how important we are to the Lord. You know, sometimes we say that Jesus wants us to join him, or Jesus wants us to help him, or Jesus wants us to work alongside of him, and we might think, I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe we think I'm too little, or maybe we think I'm too big, or maybe you think I'm too young, or maybe you think I'm too old, or maybe you think I'm not good enough. But here's the truth. Jesus loves you right now just the way you are. Jesus loves you. And what Jesus is inviting us to do is to love him and to love each other the way that Jesus loves us. Not to be somebody else, not to be different, not to be big and special or important. He just wants us to love him and to love each other right now. This story is called The Apprentice Juggler. There was a juggler in Great Park, the land of the king, who wanted to perform with the juggling master's troupe more than anything else in the whole world. But he had something terrible hidden in his heart, a secret that he would share with no one. The apprentice juggler was sure he would shame the troupe in tonight's performance. He knew he would drop a baton during the pyramid cascade. Then juggling master would know his secret, and he would lose his place in the juggling troupe. A knot in the pit of his stomach felt like a tug of war between two giants. Standing in the middle of the practice field, the apprentice juggler warmed his hands in a patch of morning sunlight. He loosened his fingers with limbering exercises. He started tossing balls in a basic crisscross pattern. The apprentice juggler concentrated. He could hear the words of juggling master's first lesson. Teach the balls to dance. The word ball is from the French. It means to dance. Make the balls dance. The balls did dance in the apprentice juggler's hands. As long as he worked alone, he did fine. In this last year as an apprentice, he had learned to toss rings, batons, clubs, and eggs, unboiled ones even. He could spin plates on sticks. He could balance umbrellas on his forehead and shoulders and hands, all at the same time. He put 3 balls into motion. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Throw, throw, catch, catch. No one knew that he was battling his inner count. No one knew that a different rhythm was ticking in his heart than in his hands. It was only when Apprentice Juggler worked with the other student jugglers, or when he did a routine with the troupe, that things went wrong. He tripped, he dropped batons. Others thought this was because he was new at juggling, but the young man knew that his inner count was just plain different. He didn't want anyone to know his secret, particularly the juggling master. To work with the troupe was the glorious goal of every apprentice. The balls danced in Apprentice Juggler's hands. He switched to the 2 in one hand. He practiced showers. He picked up 2 clubs. He tested their weight in each hand. He tossed one high. It turned in the air, a double, and then he started a third club with an outside foot kick-up. It turned twice in the air. Soon, even the clubs were dancing. He guarded himself against his inner rhythm. One of the other fellows started juggling clubs. He moved closer to the apprentice juggler and started passing. 6 clubs now looped into the air. The young men timed out loud. Pass, self, self. Pass, self, self. Pass, self, self, pass. So far, so good, thought the apprentice juggler. If only he could count out loud as he was right now, but every juggler knew that that was the sign of an amateur. Very good, shouted the juggling master. Excellent work this morning, and I have excellent news. The king will be present at tonight's great celebration. We will be performing for him. The whole troop cheered. But the apprentice juggler's heart fell to the pit of his stomach. That was where that tug of war was raging. He had juggled at great celebrations before with the other students, but tonight he was supposed to appear solo, then appear with the troupe in the finale. What if he failed before the king? It would serve him right for keeping this hidden thing to himself. All he had ever dreamed of was seeing the king smile in pleasure at his juggling. He had even imagined the king walking over to him, saying, "Well done, young man. You have a special gift." The juggling master's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Let's practice the finale." The troupe moved into position for the pyramid cascade. 4 jugglers stood in a row. A signal was shouted, "Hup!" All counted inwardly, 1, 2, up. 3 jugglers hopped on the shoulders of the first 4. The signal again, "Hup!" 1, 2, 3, up. A hand grasp, a scramble, a hop. The 2 apprentices climbed to the very peak. The clubs began looping upwards, turning and spinning up the pyramid. 8 came up from the bottom, 6 passed from the middle. The apprentices turned the rising clubs back down toward the outside men. It was quick work, but simple as long as the count was kept. The apprentice juggler knew that all 9 members of the troupe were timing inwardly. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Throw, throw, catch, catch. With horror, he realized his count was off again. He had been silently timing throw, throw, catch, throw. He caught himself and changed his pace, but it was a loud danger signal. Should he tell the juggling master? But how could he bear to have his place taken from him and given to another? What would happen if he followed his inner count? What disaster would befall him? With sagging shoulders, the apprentice juggler walked home from the practice field. Later, with lagging feet, he made his way to the huge clearing in deepest forest. Here, the great celebration took place, surrounded by the circle of sacred flames. The subjects of the king were beginning to gather in inmost circle. The sacred flames had been lit. They flickered and danced in a huge ring. Rangers in their dark blue cloaks stood posted around the flames. The music of celebration had begun. The apprentice juggler watched as celebrants walked through the gateway of flame into inmost circle. Making entrance, the ceremony was called. He saw each one become real as he or she did so. For the sacred flames showed persons not as they seemed, but as who they truly were. All disguises were gone. The laughter and the music and the joy within the flames called to the apprentice juggler, but he held himself back. How could he make entrance with this hidden thing in his heart? Wouldn't his secret be revealed when he became real? Funny old caretaker walked through the flames. His form dimmed for a moment. Then, in the bright light, he made entrance and became tall, straight, broad-shouldered, wearing the dark blue cloak and the silver clasp of a ranger. Caretaker was not what he seemed. He had become Ranger Commander, Chief Protector of the park, and intimate advisor to the king himself. The apprentice juggler squirmed. He remembered how Caretaker had found him, as a young child, hungry and abandoned, and had taken him to Mercy, who loved and nursed him. He remembered how Caretaker and Mercy hated dark, hidden things. He decided to wait for the juggling master and tell him the hidden secret that his inner count was different and dangerous to the troop. The apprentice juggler would ask him to choose another for the finale. It was the only way. A sob shook his shoulders. Never more would he feel the batons or the thrill of tumbling objects, never more the weight of the ball popping into his palm and popping out, never more the wonderful rhythm of the troop. They would give his place to another. And what would become of him? Where did he belong? The young man knew he would never make a good baker or gardener or forester. He couldn't stand singing and dancing. He had absolutely no desire to be a ranger. The only thing he had ever wanted to do was to make balls and clubs and rings and batons and eggs, unboiled eggs, dance. In anger, the apprentice juggler threw the balls that he held. This time, he kept his own count. Sure enough, the balls moved at awkward intervals. The juggling was not smooth. The rising and falling rhythms were hazardous. He had to tell his secret. He would never be like the other jugglers. A beggar was approaching the circle of fire. The man wore a brown cloak with a hood that covered his face. He carried a staff and limped. "Alms, alms," he cried. "Pennies for the poor, the poor." The beggar stopped by the boy and asked, "Juggler, are you performing in tonight's great celebration?" The young man shook his head. Suddenly he wanted to stutter out his secret. He wanted to say, "I have something hidden in my heart." The beggar motioned him to step closer and whispered, "I saw you just now. Keep your own count. Listen to the rhythm of your own timing." The apprentice juggler was amazed. How could a beggar know his count? How could he know this secret that he guarded from everyone? The beggar laughed. He said, "I understand. My rhythm is different too." With that, the beggar turned to make entrance. In the distance, the boy heard the rangers shout, "To the king! To the restoration!" The form of the man was dimmed in the flames, and then he stepped into inmost circle. A cry of recognition went up. People came running to welcome the new arrival. They shouted greetings, called to one another. And the apprentice juggler gasped. He had not been prepared for this becoming. The man stood there changed. He was as tall as Ranger Commander and handsome. The light from the flames reflected in the gold glints in his hair. He bent and swung a little child up onto his broad shoulders. Mercy, young and beautiful now that she'd made entrance, ran from a place within the circle and took his hand. She called to her husband, Ranger Commander, who came and saluted the king. The beggar is the king, thought the apprentice juggler. He said, "Keep your own count." The king raised his one hand, still holding the little child on his shoulder with the other. His voice commanded, "Let the celebration begin." Apprentice juggler raced to make entrance. The jugglers were on first. In response to the king's command, musicians began to play joyful, foot-tapping melodies. It called the subjects of the deepest forest, through the sacred flames, and into inmost circle. The jugglers were gathered at the heart of the celebration. The king and his followers circled around them, everyone clapping in time with the music. The whole troop was juggling, each on their own. Some tossed balls, some looped rings. Then it was time for the apprentice juggler's first solo act. All the others stopped. The young man's heart was in his throat. What if a ball dropped? What if he tripped? What if he couldn't control his count? And then he remembered the beggar king and his words, "Listen to the rhythm of your own timing." He listened. A new count was rising in him, his own count. Joy came tumbling. It filled his hands and his heart. The count was different from anything he had ever heard. Throw, throw, catch, 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 throw. Throw, throw, catch, 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 throw. He tossed an orange high, high into the air, then another, then another. He caught the first orange right before it hit the ground. The crowd gasped. He caught and tossed the next, falling off of his foot. The crowd gasped again, and then they laughed. The apprentice juggler dived for the third, tossed it, turned a somersault, caught the next inches off the ground, popped it back into the air, and the crowd roared. He heard murmurs. "Oh, he's wonderful. I've never seen a juggler like him before. How different!" He went on listening to the inner timing. Throw, throw, catch, 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 throw. He juggled and somersaulted and dived and counted. Finally, he was done. The crowd laughed, they clapped, they yelled hurrah and stomped their feet and clapped their hands again. The apprentice juggler bowed. He stood straight and bowed again, this time when he looked up. He was looking directly into the eyes of the king. And the king was smiling his approval. "A clown! A clown!" someone was crying. It was the juggling master. "You have the rhythm of a clown," he crowed. "You look like you can't do it. You look like you will drop something, but you don't. A clown is the best juggler of all." The juggling master became stern. He shook the juggler's shoulders. "Why didn't you tell me your rhythm was different?" Because, stammered the young man in between shakes, I thought I would lose my place in the troupe." The juggling master stopped shaking him. "Lose your place? Find your proper place, rather. Didn't you know, in the great celebration, all who desire a place find it?" With that, the juggling master put his head back and laughed. "A juggler with the instinct of a clown. Oh, they are rare, they are rare. What a troupe we will have. We'll bring down the house. We will make the balls dance." So the apprentice juggler lost his place in the troupe and found another. For all who live by the rhythm of their own inner timing, which the king approves, find a place in the kingdom all their own. More than any, they live happily ever after.